I did something terrible. Not once, but thrice. I buried truth for fame. I exchanged my soul for applause. And now, the ground itself rejects me. I sacrificed my own blood, because I believed I was doing it for God. But it wasn't God I served. It was ambition. It was vanity. And I was deceived by a man who promised elevation through death. Welcome back to the part 2 of this story. Sunday morning came like any other. The ushers were dressed in perfect suits, the choir wore white and purple robes, and Pastor Josiah stood tall at the pulpit. The church was packed. No one knew a storm was coming. Midway through the sermon titled, Breaking Through the Ground of Limitation, the chandeliers flickered. Thunder rumbled outside though the sky was clear. A strange wind passed through the auditorium, toppling hymn books and snuffing out candles. Josiah paused mid-sentence. His hand gripped the pulpit. Sweat poured down his brow, though the air conditioning was on. Then, the altar shook. Not a tremble. A quake. The congregation gasped as the marble beneath Josiah's feet began to crack, a thin fault line slicing across the pristine floor like a scar reopening. Women screamed. Ushers tried to calm people. But then the sound came. Deawadi. A childish voice, long and drawn out, echoing from beneath the altar. Josiah staggered back. He tried to speak, but nothing came. His microphone dropped, echoing through the speakers like a gunshot. The ground beneath the altar broke open, and for the briefest second, only the first row saw it clearly. A face emerged through the dust. A woman's pale face. Eyes wide open. Mouth sealed in horror. Josiah collapsed. The congregation scattered like startled birds. Shoes, Bibles, and purses were left behind as people fled from the sanctuary, pushing and shoving to escape through the massive golden doors. Panic replaced piety. For the first time in Streams of Glory Ministries, there was no benediction, only fear. Pastor Josiah lay unconscious on the floor as Brother Caleb and 2 deacons carried him away. The cracked marble was hastily covered with red carpet. The lights were turned off. And by dusk, a press release had been drafted. The tremor was caused by a structural fault beneath the altar. Services will resume after renovations. But no one believed it. Videos taken by congregants circulated online, grainy clips of the crack, the shaking, and the eerie voice calling, "Dear Eddie." A few showed the blurred image of the woman's face beneath the altar, though skeptics claimed it was CGI hysteria. But for those who saw it live, the truth was undeniable. Something was wrong. Something buried. In a hospital bed, Josiah woke up screaming. His eyes darted around, searching for the twin girls who stood at the foot of his bed in his nightmare, whispering the same lullaby he'd heard as they died. He turned to the wall and wept. Across town, Sod reviewed the new footage and prepared the next story. But when she tried to upload it, her internet connection died. Her phone refused to switch on. She heard a knock at her door. "Who is it?" she asked. Silence. Then, another knock. This time, followed by the faintest childlike voice. "Auntie Sod, open." It was Tommy. She approached Sod in secret. She was shaking, her hands clutching a rosary. "They spoke to me again," she whispered. "They said we're looking in the wrong place. The real burial wasn't under the altar, it was under the prayer room." Sod's eyes widened. "You're sure?" Tommy nodded. "They showed me in a dream. There's a door. Under the rug. Covered in ash." That night, Sod, Chuka, and Tommy returned to the church. The premises were under renovation lockdown, but Chuka knew a back way through the choir's dressing room. They slipped in through the shadows, guided only by a flashlight and a sense of divine dread. The prayer room was quiet. The rug, large and golden, lay undisturbed. Tommy dropped to her knees and peeled it back. Beneath it was wood, old, rotting, and nailed shut. Chuka used a crowbar to pry it open. A cloud of dust and soot rose into the air. A ladder led down into darkness. Without speaking, they descended into the unknown. What they found was more than a secret room. It was a tomb. Candle stumps littered the corners. Symbols written in blood marked the walls. In the center lay a pile of old garments, children's clothes, and a blood-soaked white maternity dress. Nearby was a journal. Its cover bore the initials, G.D., Glory Daramola. Sod opened it. The last entry read, "He says this will make him powerful, but I see the devil in his eyes. If anyone finds this, we didn't die naturally. We were chosen. We were silenced. Bury our bones, not our truth." Then came the final page, a drawing of the church, its altar, and a line beneath it that led to a deeper chamber labeled The Well. The journal's drawing showed a narrow path behind the underground room, leading to an old structure marked The Well. No one knew of such a thing. It wasn't in the church's building plan, nor in the blueprints Sod had dug up from city archives. But Tommy insisted she had seen it in her dream. And the spirits, if that's what they were, wanted it found. The trio crawled through the narrow passage, ducking cobwebs and brushing aside bones, yes, bones. Tiny ones. The air grew heavier the deeper they went, like diving into a forgotten ocean of sorrow. Then they saw it. The well. It was not a typical stone well. It was circular, yes, but crafted with human bones lining the edges like a twisted mosaic. Candles burned with black flame around its rim. And deep inside, water shimmered faintly, only it wasn't water. It was blood. Thick, dark, and rippling. Floating in the center of the well was a cross, Josiah's old wooden staff. The same one he used every Sunday. Suddenly, the ground shook again. Voices rose around them. Not just cries this time, but screams. From the well emerged the form of a woman, Glory. Her face was not decayed, but radiant and mournful. Behind her, the two girls floated, hands clasped, eyes empty. "You came," she said to Sod. "Tell the world what he did. Set us free, or join us." Then the blood began to rise. Chuka screamed. Tommy fainted. Sod held up the journal, trembling. "I will." The spirits vanished. But the church shook once more, and cracks began to spread, not just in the floor, but in the truth Pastor Josiah had spent years trying to bury. Pastor Josiah did not preach that Sunday. Instead, the pulpit stood empty. The choir hummed hymns in broken voices. The congregation, smaller now, sat in tense silence. In the church office, Josiah stared at his trembling hands. Night after night, he saw Glory's face in the mirror. The twins whispered to him through the vents. And now he knew, his secrets were unraveling. He called a press conference. Dressed in black, he stood before a crowd of journalists and church members, flanked by security men and his lawyer. Cameras clicked. Live feeds streamed. With shaking lips, he began. "I did something terrible. Not once, but thrice. I buried truth for fame. I exchanged my soul for applause. And now, the ground itself rejects me." Murmurs spread across the room. "I sacrificed my own blood, because I believed I was doing it for God. But it wasn't God I served. It was ambition. It was vanity. And I was deceived by a man who promised elevation through death." The crowd gasped. Josiah wept openly. He dropped to his knees, pleading for forgiveness, not from the people, but from the souls he had entombed. He turned himself in to the police that same evening. The church's board immediately distanced themselves. But it was too late. The truth had awakened. The government ordered an immediate investigation. Forensic teams arrived with equipment and cadaver dogs. What they unearthed beneath the church shook the nation. 4 bodies. Glory Daramola, pregnant, her body preserved in lime and wrapped in lace. 2 twin daughters, small and curled beside her. And another body, unidentified, later linked to a missing girl from Josiah's early ministry. The news hit the airwaves like a hurricane. People protested outside the church gates. Former members confessed to witnessing rituals they never understood. A few high-ranking pastors were arrested for conspiring in cover-ups. The church was sealed. Its walls, once white and golden, now stood as a shrine of silence and judgment. Tommy and Sod watched from a distance as the excavators hauled bones from sacred ground. Sod whispered, "The truth is loud when the dead start speaking." Tommy added quietly, "And they don't speak in tongues." 1 week later, in the middle of a quiet night, Streams of Glory Ministries caught fire. Witnesses said they saw lightning strike the cross at the church's peak, splitting it in 2. Others claimed they saw a woman in white walking through the flames, untouched, holding the hands of 2 girls. The fire burned fiercely, but when firefighters arrived, something stranger happened. Water began to gush, not from pipes, but from beneath the earth, flooding the sanctuary. It rose quickly, dousing the flames, turning the entire altar into a muddy grave. By morning, the church was gone, only blackened ruins and soggy soil remained. The media called it divine judgment. Scientists blamed underground gas. But the faithful, they knew. The well had rejected the blood that fed it. And it had returned the church to the dead. 1 year later, a new building stood on the old church site, not a cathedral, but a women's and children's shelter, funded by anonymous donors. Soda's exposé had won international awards. She turned it into a best-selling documentary called The Church Beneath the Church. But she never spoke publicly about what she saw that night at the well. Tommy never sang in a church again. But sometimes, she still heard the twins' lullaby in her dreams. In those dreams, they smiled. Not trapped. Not bleeding. Just free. As for Pastor Josiah, he remained in prison. He wrote letters, confessions, prayers, apologies. Some say he went mad. Others said he found peace. One of his final letters read, "I built a pulpit on graves. But no man can preach where angels weep. I buried them beneath my sin, but the ground remembered. And the Lord, in his silence, waited for the truth to bloom through cracks in marble." And so the city moved on. But every now and then, when the wind passed through the ruins, it carried a whisper. Not of sermons, but of a mother's love. And the vengeance of the dead. The end. Moral lesson of this story. Evil done in secret will always find its way to the light. No matter how powerful or respected someone appears, truth and justice will eventually prevail. True spirituality must be rooted in integrity, not manipulation or hidden wickedness. Thank you listeners for listening to the end of this story. I'd really appreciate it if, after enjoying this story, you could take a moment to like, share, subscribe and leave a comment. Your support means a lot and helps encourage me to keep sharing more stories. Bye.